I was asked to talk to you about green homes and green building, and I propose changing that subject in many ways because my personal interest is evolving from green homes to more resilient and future-proof homes. And a big part of that is because of my shifting interest from designing for homes that can help reduce climate change to now designing homes that can survive climate change. So I'd like to just share some of the pieces to that. And do I click?
Yeah. Click.
And to advance is the same thing?
You can hit the space bar or the arrow keys.
Okay, thank you. This is the creaking door opening. I want just a little background on myself. I was raised on family farm, spent most of 10 summers from junior high to high school working on my family farm in Kansas. And for those of you who are farmers and know farmers, you know about the pragmatism that comes along with that. So it was where I developed an early interest in farming and architecture, building forts, solving problems, equipment repairs. There's a whole host of great skills that kids growing up on farms learn. And as you can probably imagine, I too was in a tornado in Kansas. So, and this is at a fairly young age. I was 12, maybe 13, and we'd just come back out of the farm and into the house. My grandma had baked some pies, and my grandpa looked out the window and saw, we used to burn our trash, and the trash can was headed straight for the house, and so he said, let's head for the basement. No sooner did we get to the bottom of the stairs than the home started collapsing, and we started seeing daylight through the floors. I have to tell you though, what I'm wanting to talk about is this thing called resiliency in both architecture and our personal lives. My grandmother gave me an amazing gift during that storm. So, okay, 12-year-old boy standing next to petrified grandma, and she has a death grip onto what she thought was my hand, but it was my crotch. And I had this strange grin on my face as I tried to pull away from her, the harder she grabbed me. Totally oblivious to what she was grabbing. I got through that tornado with a smile on my face. So there are interesting ways that we can survive storms. Now, this storm was in '67 in Garden City, Kansas. The other thing that Garden City was known for was the Clutter family. This family went to the Methodist church where my family attended, and I was too young to know of the murder of the Clutter family until the movie came out several years later, and that movie was In Cold Blood. And this set, I have goosebumps right now just even saying that. It was a terrifying experience for those of us in the community. My parents, my uncle knew the Clutters. They were farmers who lived outside of Garden City, and it had a big impact on feeling safe in the home, and could this happen to us? You have had many experiences similar to that here in Oregon. The Columbus Day storm of, was that '62, I believe? I was not living here at that time. But it really calls into question the safety and the security and the trust that we put in our homes, our places of work, our worship, our schools. And as an architect, this was becoming increasingly of concern to me as I was designing for durability. And all of us have probably built forts out of sofa cushions and blankets, and then we migrate to backyard cardboard structures and tree forts, and we learn at a very early age how things fall apart and what it takes to hold things together. There's a tornado that went through Manzanita just last year, and that tree that you see fallen is of a home of our design in Manzanita. So even though it was a tornado, it's related to wind and the threat of trees on our homes as well. Earthquakes are not that uncommon and becoming increasingly of concern for us in the Pacific Northwest. I was obsessed with watching the film of the tsunami in Japan, the multiple films. It was unbelievable, the devastation that caused. Here, this village had survived the earthquake and then to be wiped out by the tsunami that followed shortly thereafter. Mudslides in Oregon, designing, we needed to make good selections on the sites that for our homes and our buildings. This, I believe, was a home in Corvallis. It was not one of our designs. And then our own floods. This was a painting that my wife did of the flooded Willamette River. She chartered a helicopter and went up to, do I need that? Thank you. Unless, it was for the TV. Sorry, TV. Did it turn it back on? Okay. That's all better anyway. Designing our area for floods. In '95, I moved up here from Santa Rosa, and we know what happened there this summer. This was the Coffee Park neighborhood, the devastation of the homes in downtown Santa Rosa. I don't know if we know just what happened yet, why the fire started, and why. Well, we know that the wind whipped the fire into place. Several of our friends lost their homes. I'm not sure that there's anything we could have done of a fire of this magnitude and with the temperatures that this fire reached. And by meaning anything we could have done, I don't know if there is an architectural response that we could have prepared for. Could we have designed a concrete bunker? Possibly, but the fires were so hot that they melted almost everything on site. Bill and I subscribed to a magazine called Architect, and this summer this was the cover of the magazine, and it was acknowledging all of the disasters that are occurring around the world. And the real question they're asking is, what can architecture do about climate change? I'm not sure that there is that much that we can do about climate change anymore other than to prepare for more disasters. There was a time when I thought that we could actually reverse the trend towards global climate volatility. I don't know if that's the case anymore. The link between architecture and climate change is in the generation of electricity through coal-fired power plants. Coal is one of the major causes of the climate changing components, the emissions. Here in Oregon, we do have a coal-fired power plant out in Boardman. Provides about 49% of our electricity needs here in the state. Even though we think that we're hydropower, we have a very high coal component. And Portland General Electric is working to reduce that. Pacific Power has coal-fired power plants throughout the Pacific Northwest. And until we can get off coal, I don't know that we're going to be able to reduce the impact that that emissions have on climate change. So this is just a collage of the type of work that we're trying to do, we strive to do. It's important for us that we design our homes to be able to survive, for our clients to be able to survive catastrophes. The home directly above me in the your upper left-hand corner was designed and built down in Baja for former dentist here in Salem, Ed Epifani. Some of you may know Dr. Epifani. The home was built out of concrete, and it actually did survive a hurricane that parked itself directly overhead for about 3 days several years ago. We try to integrate renewable energy into our homes as much as feasible for each client. We try to build with durable materials. We try to provide fresh air for the indoor occupants, and I can go through more of that in just a little bit. So what I'd like to do is just share with you what I consider to be some of the key ingredients of a resilient, future-proof home. And it's obvious that it needs to become a safe haven for from physical threats for the occupants. You've heard the phrase aging in place. I prefer thriving in place. That's what gray hair will do to a vocabulary. The importance of considering finances as the ability to remain in your home, connections with neighborhood and community, responding to changing needs and opportunities. That too is tied with thriving in place as maybe you downsize your home, and facilitating physical health and emotional well-being. Homes actually do have a role in that. So let's take a look first at the physical threats, because they're some of the most obvious, and part of our one of our key expectations of architecture is that it provides shelter for us. It provides a safe place for us to retreat to and to be in. We spend a significant amount of our lives inside the home. Think how vulnerable we are when we're at sleep or at rest in our homes. One of the changes that's been occurring in the last few years is that FEMA has been redrawing the flood maps, and the FEMA rules have been changing. Here in Salem, it has an impact on us as well, because one of the recent things that we've learned about the FEMA maps is they do not take into account the elevated dirt or rock and dirt for trains. So throughout Salem, we have many elevated, what appear to be levees for the trains, but they in fact do not qualify. So there are hundreds of homes that thought that they were safe from floods here in Salem, and they're finding that they actually are in these new floodplains. We do design quite a few homes on the coast, and designing for the new FEMA flood maps and the changing rules for flood insurance have quite an impact. And part of this is to prevent homes from being built in areas they shouldn't be. A big part of designing a home is for its ability to not only withstand gravitational loads, but to also be able to withstand lateral loads. And there are two main types of lateral loads that we design for here in Oregon. There are wind loads, and there are seismic or loads associated with earthquakes. Most of the time, the wind loads dominate the, sorry. Yeah, it's a little, keeps wanting to. Most of the time here in Oregon, it's the wind loads that dominate over the seismic loads. The wind loads and the seismic loads are going to be changing in the next few years. Our codes are not static, our codes change. And one of the things I'd like to point out about the codes, which we think if we have a recent code-built home, well, that's not necessarily a guarantee of safety, because our building codes are designed to be a balance between the benefits and the costs. Like in Santa Rosa, if we were to have a fireproof home by code required, it may cost more than what individuals could afford. So when our codes are created, they're created with the intention of balancing risk and cost. And so one way to look at codes is that it's the minimum legally allowable requirement. So when you look at a home that structure's been designed to code, that's minimum requirement. And very often do our clients want to pay for a home that exceeds structural code criteria. Now, some of our buildings are required to be designed to higher seismic and lateral and wind load criteria, like hospitals and police facilities. And I think that we'll be fortunate to have a new police facility that is designed and built towards better seismic codes than what we currently have. And the other part of this is designing our homes and having them built so that they can withstand fires, so that they can be durable, low maintenance, resistant to pests. This is my own home that we're nearing completion. We have metal roof. We have an exterior siding material that's a combination of metal siding as well as a fiber cement product that is also resistant to fires. And we have triple pane windows because part of this is also about energy, durability for energy and survivability. It's harder for a flying 2x4 to go through a triple pane window than it is a double pane window. And more, we're designing now windows that can withstand hurricane force debris with laminated glass and other types of glazing products that are designed to withstand those severe coastal conditions. And then occupancy during power outages. That's an important part too. And that's not just about installing a backup generator, that's also designing a home that has insulation values so that you can remain in the home if there's a power outage and it's extreme heat or extreme cold. There's one of the Tesla, the electric car company is coming out with battery systems for homes, and they're called the Powerwall. And one of the things we're excited about is, this isn't a plug for Tesla because there are other companies and products that are developing this as well too. We think that the ideal backup power system for a home is going to be a hybrid car, a gas-electric combination car that not only charges itself off of the solar panels that are on the roof, but that it can also feed electricity back into the home so the home itself becomes the backup generator. This is probably not that far away. This is maybe 2 to 3 years away right now. So it's going to be an exciting change and innovation for many of our homes. One of the other things that happened in my life is that my mother, who lived alone for most of her adult life, she fell in the apartment she was living in. She broke her ankle. She couldn't get up, and she lay on the floor of her home for 2 days. She called out many times until she was exhausted, and she could not. Her neighbors finally realized that they hadn't seen her. The newspapers were piling up, so they knocked on the door. She summoned the energy to reply, and so she was rescued. But I was surprised to find how common this actually is, of people having a broken hip and falling, or in her case, she just fell wrong and broke her ankle. This is not my mother, by the way, but this is a visual expression of the concern of designing our homes so that we reduce the tripping hazards, so that we reduce the risk of falling. And that includes stairs, that includes getting in and out of a tub. Dogs, every one of us has probably tripped on a dog at some time, myself more times than I care to admit. Doesn't mean get rid of your dog, it just means, work that out with your dog, so. Yeah. So we believe that another part of designing for future-proof homes, whether it's a new home, whether it's a remodel, whether it's an owner-occupied home, whether it's a rental, whether it's single-family, or whether it's multifamily, is having the home set up to enable you to thrive in place. And this is a floor plan of my own home. I thought I'd just point out a few of the things. For those of you who can read floor plans, you get a bonus point. For those of you who can't, I don't have a pointer, my apologies. Designing all of the main functions on one level, or selecting a home to live in where you have the entry, the great room, which, kitchen, living, dining, the master bedroom, the master bathroom, your laundry room, all on one level. That's an important part, whether you are aging, you're thriving, or whether you're planning for the possibility that you might have a surgery or an accident sometime. I've spent some time in a wheelchair. It was nothing serious. I was in a in a burn. I had second and third degree burns over my body, but it required me to stay in a wheelchair for a while. And it was amazingly difficult to get around. We had to build a temporary ramp. It was very problematic. So if you have the opportunity to make selections to live all on one level, I think you'll find it goes a long way for you in your life. There's a few other little pointers: 36-inch wide doors everywhere you can, except maybe utility closets, handrails and grab rails, rocker switches, large switches which are real easy to activate rather than push button or the more difficult toggle switches. Having lighting, LED lighting, LED light bulbs, so that you don't have to change the light bulbs as often. So there's you're reducing the chance that you're climbing a ladder just to replace a light bulb. The toilet's about 18 inches from the wall, so that you can easily add grab bars in the future if you need them, and that will include the bathtubs and showers. Having room in a bathroom, having a bathroom large enough, having a bathroom large enough so that you can have a turning radius so a wheelchair can easily roll around. Having a roll-in shower so that you can go in either with a walker, a wheelchair, or with assistance, that there's enough room in the shower without a threshold on the shower. All of these things can be done with retrofits. There are some firms in town, construction firms in town, that specialize in retrofitting and remodeling conventional homes to enable thriving in place. I think this one goes without saying. Congratulations to all of you, by the way, for still being alive and meeting your financial needs. And the importance that designing for neighborhood and community has. I mean, should we all sing together? Oh, who? Okay. Mr. Rogers. And the importance of developing neighbor relations. Part of this has to do, too, with being resourceful. And it has to do with, as Salem doesn't have any co-housing yet, but it's probably just a matter of time till we do have some co-housing developments. And what a co-housing development is where individuals agree to live on a piece of land in smaller homes in close proximity to one another, and so that they have some shared resources like gardens, like tool sheds, like community rooms, maybe a guest quarters, maybe there's a kitchen in the community room. So it can become a way to create a tighter sense of community in closer proximity for those people who are opting for that. There are a number of co-housing communities up in Portland, and they include young children, emerging families, young adults, and some of the best ones in this country are a blend between young, old, and pets, no pets, with a lot of diversity. Changing needs and opportunities. You have probably heard that here in Salem we now have accessory dwelling units are approved. There are certain requirements associated with them, but they're a nice way to turn a garage into a rental unit. And that could also be a basement, or it could be an addition. It could be a second floor added to your home as well. There is the City of Salem has a website that addresses accessory dwelling units. There are a number of benefits to the accessory dwelling units. Economic is one. Another one is it enables you to stay in your home. And there in Portland, I know some people, they actually built an accessory dwelling unit thinking that they were going to rent it out. They loved the cute little home so much that they moved into the home in the back, and they're renting out their home in the front now. So there's other benefits of having accessory dwelling units include security and safety, having more people living together, obviously the economic benefit of having a rental unit. The other part of planning for changing times are smart homes. And I'm on the fence on this one. Smart homes are basically homes that have a lot of electronics, mostly low voltage electronics to communicate, the thermostats, the appliances, the lighting. And the reason I'm on the fence about it is there's also an increasing risk of what's called E-bombs or cyber terrorism. If a satellite should malfunction, does that mean that you're locked out of your home? And I suppose it's my own insecurity with not even being able to figure out how to do some of this electronics, but it may be that people who are more comfortable with the technologies will be more comfortable with the smart homes. I tend to be more analog than digital just in general. But designing homes so that they can be converted to be able to accommodate emerging technologies is something that we have to take into account as well. The days of fog that we have ahead of us have us bracing for seasonal affect disorder. And we recognize the importance when we design homes for natural light, views to the outdoors to connect with nature, and the value that nature and natural light can have on our well-being during the winter months. There are some quick fixes. Well, nothing's a quick fix for seasonal affect disorder, but there are light fixtures that you can buy to help you through seasonal affect disorder, or SAD. The other part of this is about indoor air pollutants. The device on your right is a heat recovery ventilator. There are very few of these installed in homes right now. My guess is these will be required before too long. What they are is they're like the lungs for a home. They bring fresh air in through tubes, and they put them through a heat exchanger, and the warmer exhaust air through this heat exchanger warms the cooler incoming air, goes through a filter system, and then distributes the fresh air in the home. So it's constantly cycling at a very low speed so that there's always fresh air in the home. They have booster switches so that if in the restroom, if you want to accelerate the fresh air intake, or if you have a gathering of people and you're generating more CO2 in the home, that these heat recovery ventilators will basically clean the air with more people. So they're very energy efficient, they're very quiet, they're pretty amazing. And one of the keys here, the little panels right up there, those are where the filters are. There's a filter for both the incoming air and the exhaust air, and you just pull those out and you replace the filters. You can wash them, you can put them in your dishwasher, wash them in the sink. This is a little much to take in right now. These are just some of the indoor air pollutants and that we find and we have to respond to in the design of homes. One of my favorites, or maybe I should say my least favorites, are dust mites. Dust mites, those little devils, their excretions are very harmful to young emerging lungs in children. They are they're very common in our homes here in the Northwest, and they're very hard to get rid of as well. I mean, especially if you have carpet in your homes. This is one of it's because of the dust mites and the relationship that they have on asthma in small children is we're trying to eliminate carpet from homes as much as we can. Rugs are better because you can take rugs out and have them cleaned periodically. Vacuuming alone is not enough to get dust mites out, but it helps. And central vacuum systems are better than walk around, follow behind vacuums because they're more effective they have higher suction power to eliminate the dust mites from the carpets. Washing bedding very often, even your pillows. Take your pillow, put it in the dryer for 30 minutes, 20 minutes, sometime around there once a month, and it will help kill the dust mites and from living in your pillow. Isn't this fun? We're all familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and as architects, our world is down there in that safety world. Our job is to create a safe foundation for so that all of those other things in our lives can flourish. And there's quite a relationship between the resiliency of homes and the resiliency of our personal lives. And we have to be able to create this safe foundation, this safe place of refuge, so that we can live our lives and continue to enjoy other aspects of relationships, mental, social, and spiritual. And are there any questions? Here's some microphones right here. Okay. What's that? Okay. Who does the questions? Do I do you do, they do, okay.
This is Peter.
Hi, Peter.
Do you have any comment on Tesla's roofing tiles that incorporate photovoltaic elements that act as power generators actually within the tile?
We haven't used those yet. We're a little cautious. We like to see products on the market for a little time before we start using them, and that's a product that just came out in the last, year? 14 months. So far we have preferred solar panels over thin film solar electric, because solar panels have a tighter concentrate. You can generate more power per square foot with a solar panel than you can with a thin film. And so we're looking forward to learning more about the Tesla tiles, and I never used one, so I don't know.
Yeah, we have a home that was built in 1927, and I'm hoping I'll drop off the planet before the earthquake comes. But how would you start reinforcing that home just in case? Would you start at the foundations and do things there and then work up, or easy things to do? I'm not a young chick anymore.
You'd be surprised. With regards to preparing the home for the seismic event, which I'll go into more detail after our break, the big one, the 9.0, do you have a crawl space? You have a basement with concrete basement walls? Then having the sill plate of your home, which is the horizontal boards that go around the edge on top of the concrete, and then your wood studs, the wood framing sits on top of this sill plate, having it anchored to the concrete. They probably did not use anchor bolts in 1926. That would be one of the first things to do. What that will do is that will prevent your home from sliding off its foundation in the event of an earthquake. Those are very expensive repairs when they do slide off. And the anchoring systems, I think you could probably have that done for somewhere around $5,000 to $7,000. And there are some firms in town that do that work. You can do it yourself too. You can go online and you can find these adapters that mount the sill plate to the concrete. And I think they're about $35 a piece for the plates. And then you have to have a special drill and drill bit to be able to drill into the concrete. But you could do it yourself. So.
This is Paul. I lived in Santa Rosa from '76 to 2004. Was down there over the Thanksgiving week. And you're, of course, familiar with the Fountain Grove area, which is up in the hills. But in the midst of all that devastation, here and there was a house that was perfectly untouched. And you say, well, it was arbitrary, but I found out, talking to other people, that one of the homes that looked like how did that survive, the people built it especially to be fireproof, and actually they said they had to go through a few hoops and hurdles to get variances to build the home that way. But it was kind of amazing to see in the middle of all that complete devastation, whereas there was a home that literally looked, it was untouched, except for burnt shrubs. So it's certainly possible to do, even with as big a firestorm as that was.
What they found with fires down in Southern California, I don't know if you remember, I think it was about 7 years ago, inland from La Jolla, there were a couple hundred homes that were destroyed in fires. And it was they had wood roofs, wood shingle roofs, and these shingles would catch fire and they just float through the wind when they're embers, and they'll land on another roof. And that was the main cause of these fires spreading. And down there, it was almost the opposite of what you just described. There would be one home destroyed in a neighborhood of homes that weren't touched. And it was because of these flying embers landing on a wood shingle roof. And so many of these neighborhoods, it was required that you had wood shingle roofs. And so those requirements, those CC&Rs are now changing. So.
Hi, my name is Milt. There's a apparently sudden interest in what we call tiny homes. Is that largely a function of finance, being able to afford them, or is there something else going on there that I don't realize?
What are you thinking? When you ask the question, are you thinking there may be something else going on?
I don't. Actually, I'm just interested that every time I open a newspaper or anything else, I see advertisements for tiny homes and groups of tiny homes built in the same location.
There are some characteristics about tiny homes that could maybe help answer that question. They tend to be younger people rather than older people. They tend to be single people rather than married or married with kids. And those single people are both of all ages. They also tend to be qualify for accessory dwelling units if they're not on wheels. So they're often a source of rental income for whoever owns the property that they're built on. So my guess is the number one reason is economics. So finances, the ability to afford a home. Some people, I went on a tiny home tour up in Portland a few years ago, and what you find up in Portland is that it's part of the value system and the ethos of many of these people to try to live in a smaller place. It's less maintenance, it's less responsibility. It enables them to have a life other than having to live their life for their home. So that might point to another purpose, which would be lifestyle and values. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Sally Shriver. I noticed in one of your earlier pictures the fire damage. How come the trees were all standing? Why weren't they burned?
Can I defer the answer to the fellow Santa Rosa resident?
Well, the way it worked out is the fact that before they built the homes up there, the fires would come through, they'd burn the leaves and so forth, and then they'd move on. Basically, they built all these big homes, and these were 3,500 and up size homes. They were fuel. They were basically a pile of flammable material. The houses were, and so and that's part of what happened is that flammable material got blown into downtown Santa Rosa, but basically the home became its own fire, and some of the trees still escaped because the wind was blowing through them. It wasn't as heavy a fuel load.
I would also add that large timber is hard to burn. What it does, it chars on the outside. Heavy timber construction is more fire resistant than wood frame or steel. So a heavy timber home, it'll char on the outside, but it'll stay intact and for a longer period of time. It takes a substantial amount of time for a heavy timber home to burn. And that's not to be confused with a wood frame home, which are all the, it's called stick built. Now the challenge with a steel home in a fire is that the steel, when it gets hot, deforms. And deformed steel beams are very problematic. They're very expensive to replace. So that would be another factor there. Just another note too, friends of mine who their home actually did survive, they were in Sonoma, and they were fascinated as they walked around their property. They found many of the trees were burning from the inside. And I don't understand that phenomenon, but they took some photographs, and it was very unusual to see. So, yeah.
Nathan Jenks here. I
Mhm.
wonder if some of the fire travels underground through the roots and then up into the tree.
I've never heard
do
that.
I know
Pretty
some-
scary thought.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And strapping. We had our house strapped, and one of the questions I asked was, well, to what extent might we expect the house to survive? And they said, don't know. So we're just hoping that will help to add value to the house. What do we know? I wanted to ask more about some of the safety features for us older folks. For example, why aren't grab bars regular in houses? I am not yet 95, but I've been slipping in the shower all my life. How come we don't have those? Or ramps in the front of the house that say, hi, old slow person lives here. Or smart homes that are so dang smart I can't figure out how to turn the heat up or down, or my mother can't. Those are the kinds of things I'm wondering about.
Well, there's one I can comment on, and that's grab bars. Grab bars, they're very institutional looking. There's a great business opportunity to come out with a new generation of grab bars, and some of those are already on the market, that look more residential, less institutional, rather than being satin stainless steel and with the curved edge. So that will help a lot. Then I think we'll start to see more. And that's baby boomers. We're not getting younger. I have some grab bars in my own home. We put them in. We found some that didn't look as bad as I'm sorry, I shouldn't say it's bad. It's institutional, So, but we're gonna see a lot of those showing up. Another business opportunity for those of you out there waiting to or looking for an opportunity to start a business. Talbar supply and installation.
This is Harvey. I'd like to ask a little bit about the new thing that we're seeing, possibly building skyscrapers and so on, with cross-laminated timber. And how do they stand up in a situation of fire, earthquake, and other stresses?
I have yet to work on a cross-laminated timber project. It's a very rapidly emerging technology, and I just read yesterday that Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, one of the largest architecture firms in the U.S., is planning a large high-rise out of CLT, cross-laminated timber construction. The benefit to the Pacific Northwest is this is a material that we produce right here, and we have companies, Ferreras Lumber for one, that is starting to produce this material. The potential, I think, is very high. It's very good for fire rating, for that same reason that it will char but not collapse. In a period of time that enables the occupants to get out of the building. That's what a large part of our fire codes are about, is about saving the occupants, not so much saving the building. The other part about cross-laminated timbers is in a high-rise structure is their flexibility, their ability to move with an earthquake rather than crack and crumble. But a big part of that's going to depend upon the connections where the floors and the walls and the structural materials come together. It's going to be interesting to see.
Hi, this is Don. I'm concerned about those bad little creatures that get in the carpet. At least my wife is. And she's, somebody's always knocking at the door and talking about how they have a better deal than somebody else. So how do you find out how do you find a credible place that's that you can be sure they're really doing something?
Another business opportunity.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think it's reached the scale of being a health risk to the point that it's creating regulation and creating not a saturated market, but a market that has layers, so that there's the cream of the crop of the services separating themselves from the lower. I just think it's too young of a market for people who can mitigate against dust mites in a home. Personally, I think the best way is to just through your own home practices with laundering your sheets and putting your pillows in the dryer, vacuuming on a regular basis, keeping your vacuum bag, as clean and fresh as you can. Pet dander's the big deal too. And most of this, though, is about young children. I mean, it's for those of you who have asthma and still suffer from pollen in the air. There are retrofits that you can get for these heat recovery ventilators. It does not have to be a new home. You can have your home remodeled to have these put in it, and that will help too. So, for filtration in your home.
Hello, this is Irma. I want your opinion on soy-based spray installation.
Okay, big topic. Wow. We have used a lot of closed cell spray foam over the last several years. And closed cell spray foam is very different from open cell spray foam. Closed cell has a tighter, denser structure. Closed cell is the type that you'll see used for boat floats or for floating docks. Open cell spray foam would just absorb water and sink. Closed cell spray foam is excellent for sealing a home, especially in an unvented roof. The soy base, the real challenge with open cell and closed cell spray foam isn't the composition of the material, the chemistry of the material. It's the blowing agent that it's installed with. That's where the most significant environmental impact has. Most of the blowing agents have a real high CO2 component to them. Their contribution to greenhouse gases is very high. And there's a lot of research and emerging technology on that. If you ask me, in 6 months it'd be different what it was today, which is what is different was 6 months ago, and that's a good thing. So.
One approach to a more friendly looking grab bar, pleasure boats have them all along their sides. They're made of teak, and they look very good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nice idea. One of the challenges there is that some of those are not, there actually are rating standards that for grab bars. There's a high liability for a manufacturer to sell a grab bar that would fail if it had a force put on it greater than what it was, intended. But it's there. I've seen some beautiful wood ones too, so it's a nice idea. Another business opportunity. Do you have a card? Are you making these in your shop right now? But that's great.
This is Jim. I had a question about air purifiers. I was thinking about your comments on dust mites, and I know I'm going to go home tonight. When I'm falling asleep, I'll be, wondering about the nutritious value of breathing in dust mites or whatever. Do you think air purifiers, good ones, help resolve a little bit of that issue besides vacuuming and all the rest?
the challenge I've had with standalone air purifiers is that they're just located in one area. And are you going to put one in every room, or just maybe put one in the bedroom? Now, the nice thing about them in the bedroom is that they make a really nice sound that's very soothing at night. And if there's anywhere to be concerned about them, it is in the bedroom where you sleep. So if you're looking for a whole house solution, I'm not sure that's what it is unless you're going to carry this around with you in the rooms you go. Maybe you're better off with some sort of a backpack with you, you know. But you know, you bring up another point, and that is just, you know, it's really frightening when you think about all this stuff. And I'm sorry to pollute your minds with all of these fears. It's just, I think if you get on top of them though, and at least feel like you have your bases covered and have these things, you know, at least mitigated, then there can be less fear in your life. You know, this is the Institute for Continuous Learning. You're not, you know, learning new and scary stuff is not new to you. And it's what you do with that and how you, every one of you is going to be different on how you have to find this balance. When I first learned about dust mites, I went totally berserk. I mean, I came home and my wife was just like, "You are really becoming you know, obsessed with cleaning. What is the matter? Is this some sort of new psychosis that you're developing?" And so anyway, I've calmed down a little bit.
My name is Kay. When you speak about putting the pillows in the dryer, what temperature in the dryer?
For me, it's as high as possible. Yeah. And it's my understanding that what we're trying to do, or we're trying to kill the eggs, the dust mite eggs. Now, the dust mites and the dust mite eggs aren't the bad thing. It's their poop. So, you know, that's what's so harmful to young developing lungs. So, lovely, huh?
I think we've reached the break time. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next hour.
The architect has a disclaimer to make. When I say I put my pillow in the dryer on high, I'm talking about a feather pillow, not a foam pillow, okay? So the houses that burned down due to putting the pillow in the dryer, I clarified myself. Did you get that CCTV? Okay, good. So the other thing that I heard, one individual has a latex pillow, or they've replaced their pillow with latex, and where are you? And your latex and dust mites are not compatible, is that correct? Okay, so I didn't know that, so latex pillows may be an option. Don't put them in the dryer. Okay, memory foam, I don't think you want to put those in the dryer. If you have a memory foam or latex, I don't know what you do, but shake it out. Freezer? Okay, maybe the freezer. So, any other clarifications before we move on? Real loud.
Is it the mites that are the problem, or are the mites excrement the problem, or is it what's in the excrement, like viruses and that sort of thing?
Okay, good question. The question was, are the mites the problem? Is it the mites excrement the problem, or is it stuff that's in the mites excrement? And I don't know the answer. It's not the mites themselves, it's the excrement, but I don't know I've never dissected the excrement, so, or.
Antivirus comes in the rat excrement.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wondered if that was analogous.
It sounds like subject for further reading, yeah. lovely thing to do, you know, if you're having trouble sleeping at night. Well, that doesn't compare at all to the Big Rip. Okay, hate to bring this up. I'm sure you've heard it before. You're going to hear it again. It's a serious topic for architects, engineers, and contractors, and it should be also for homeowners and those who occupy office buildings. So this is the graph that is inside a little booklet that you can get. It's called Living on Shaky Ground. The city of Salem has these. You maybe have seen them. I'm not sure if they're at the library right now. It's a document that's put out by the Oregon Emergency Management Department. And this is one of the graphs that's inside it. And let's see if I can use this pointer here. This is a graph of all of the earthquakes of 8 and 9 magnitude since 8,000 BC. What's interesting about this is that there's an 8 or 9 magnitude earthquake in our region every 250 years. We haven't had one since 1700. This is what is of concern to people who help us plan for emergencies in our region. And this is part of the wake-up call, really, for all of us. And let me just briefly describe part of what is happening. You're familiar with plate tectonics, that the crust of the surface of our Earth has all these plates, and these plates move. Well, where there are 2 plates along our coast, there's the San Juan de Fuca plate, and there is the North American plate, and they've been locked for some time. And the San Juan plate, which is the one that's offshore, as it moves and it's colliding with the North American plate, it's creating tension all along that plate. You've maybe heard that sea levels are rising around the world. Well, that's not the case on the Oregon coast. Sea levels are actually dropping on our coast because the Earth is being pushed up by the pressure on these plates. That's one of the reasons why you see the ghost forest in Nesquin right now, because our Earth is being pushed up. One of the things that is expected to happen when these plates release their pressure is that the coastline on the Oregon coast will drop, they think, between 6 and 10 feet, just to return to where it would be if there wasn't this buildup that's occurring here. So that will be flooding that results from the release of the pressure and the renormalization of the coastline. That doesn't even include what may be the tsunami that follows after that. Now, what we hope is going to happen is that this area all along here, this is the fault zone from British Columbia all the way down to Northern California. There are some subzones in here, and our hope is that these will not be what's called the total rip. The total rip is when the whole fault fails at once. We will be able to withstand this earthquake much better if it fails in sections. And there's some evidence that this zone down here in Northern California may fail on its own and may fail first. So not that we wish that upon them, but it helps reduce the chance of this total rip, which is actually pretty shocking. There's a lot of information that's available both in this guide as well as other resources on what you can do in your home to prepare for not just the big Cascadia subduction fault, but also for small earthquakes. We mentioned tying your home to the foundation, tying your water heater back. The other thing that we find when earthquakes happen is that they start fires. And the San Francisco fire, for example, that was launched by an earthquake, and it resulted in fires from gas explosions. It was really the fire that resulted from the earthquake that caused more damage than the earthquake itself. What was that, 1906? Wow, what a well-versed group. Yeah. So securing your gas lines is important, anchoring your water heater, especially if it's a gas water heater, knowing where your shutoff valves are for your water, your electricity, and your gas, securing art on the wall. A lot of evidence of damage to occupants during earthquakes is from falling objects, large dressers falling over, or bureaus or bookcases. So anchoring that information. But you can find that information in this booklet right here. On the back of this booklet, there are steps on how to prepare for the big rip, what to do, how to prepare for the tsunami, and what to do afterwards, web resources. And then there's this area right here where you can just write down all your important information, and you tape this to either the side of your refrigerator or the back of a door, somewhere that it's going to be easy for you to get to. My wife and I have been fortunate to have a home in Neskowin, and the concern is to plan for the tsunami. Yes, the earthquake's important, but the tsunami is a big factor all along our coastline. Some communities are fairly far along in planning for both the earthquake and the tsunami. Canna Beach, Manzanita being two of those. One of the things that is happening all along the coast and is happening here in Salem is the formation of what are called CERT teams, Community Emergency Response Teams. And I have not gone through the CERT training. It's one of my objectives to do next year. I think it's important for all of us to be aware of the ingredients of the CERT training, and we definitely, it's kind of like a swimming pool. We may not want to own it ourselves, but we want to have a good friend, or preferably a neighbor who owns that pool. So I think it's something that if you can't do yourself, or you're not interested or able, at least encourage your neighbor, to go through that training. One thing that was interesting about the village of Neskowin, you can see let's see if I can get this. You can see all of this is expected to be flooded. This is all the tsunami evacuation zone. And here was what was the eye-opener for my wife and myself. We deliberately bought a piece of property that was up on the hill above Neskowin. We're about 130 feet above sea level. And look at this, the evacuation route, how do I do this here? There it is. There's the evacuation route for the village of Neskowin. Our home's right there, and there's the assembly area. So we're planning with our neighbors on how to accommodate 200, 300, maybe 500 people, all having to live in this area for what may be a month, because the roads will probably be cut off, bridges will be down, and we've already established agreements that we can break into somebody's home if we need to for food and supplies. We're actually having conversations about where do we set up the morgue, because there may be hundreds of bodies that have been injured and aren't able to survive till rescue. I've offered my home to serve as a wine cellar. It can be used for medicinal purposes, but it creates a interesting dynamic, and you have different communications with your neighbors when you start anticipating how you will respond to an event like this. But it's not all doom and gloom, and there are lessons that we're learning from other communities that have gone through floods and hurricanes and earthquakes. One of the threats that we didn't talk about was the possibility of peak oil. And peak oil is that point with which where we no longer will have the fuel resources to serve our communities and our personal needs for non-nuclear fuel sources or non-renewable fuel sources. The peak oil actually occurred in Cuba in the 1990s with the breakup of the Soviet Union. Something like 50% of all of their fuel that was provided to them through the Soviet Union no longer was being shipped to Cuba, and they lost close to 80% of their food sources. So the bright side of this is that the residents of Cuba responded quite heroically, and there were some interesting lessons to be learned. Their large agricultural farms converted to small neighborhood gardens because they didn't have the fuel for the tractors and the trucks. So the industry changed on how they fed their people. They relied more on horses to move people and goods about than they did their cars and their trucks. The horses produced manure. The manure was good for the gardens. There were some really interesting relationships that developed. And from those who have gone back to interview people who went through that, and there's a group out of Yellow Springs, Ohio. I believe they're called Community Solutions. They produced this movie, The Power of Community. They found that neighbors got to know one another better, that they formed relationships to watch children. They set up their own neighborhood school systems. They developed neighborhood policing. It was really a very inspirational response to what otherwise could have been a catastrophe and a community collapse. So it's not the same as a natural disaster like they've experienced in many small countries in the last few years, but there may be some lessons that we can learn through this. I suppose the most being the importance of our relationships with our neighbors and our neighborhoods. So that's all I got. Yeah. You do questions again, or can I ask questions of you, or how does it work?
Hi, oh boy, this really works. My name is Franca. My question is about the construction of houses. I lived in Europe a long time, and everything is reinforced concrete because they don't have our beautiful forests. I was just thinking, what kind of political force needs to be put behind, shifting from building resource from wood to concrete or brick? I mean, I guess the house would cost more, but if we're looking towards the future, do you think that's possible, that we politically can get into promoting other materials other than the wood? And I'll give you a little tiny example. I have a cousin in Italy who will not visit me because I have a wooden house. He's fearful. And he says, and I said, well, my house is like everybody else's house, and they're just not accustomed to that, and it just makes them feel insecure. So I could see his point of view. So I was just wondering, can we have the political will to shift from our forests to other material?
A tough one there. Here's some thoughts that come to mind. Japan has a long history of building with wood, and many of those homes are very resilient and respond to the forces caused by earthquakes, with quite a bit of fluidity. They actually design and build their homes to move, and that's part of their response. The other thing, They do. And in fact, Frank Lloyd Wright designed the Imperial Hotel and was one of the few buildings standing after the earthquake of the year of the Japanese earthquake that leveled Tokyo. Yeah, somewhere around then. But that was a very innovative concrete building. There. Mm-hmm. A couple of those homes that I showed in our own portfolio are concrete homes. And there are a couple cost-effective ways to build a concrete home. One is with insulated concrete forms, and somebody here in this audience has a home. They live in an insulated concrete form home. And that's where, in their case, they have these foam blocks that are like really large Legos that are stacked, and then you pour a concrete core, and it has steel inside as well. There's a company in Philomath that makes these blocks out of like a wood chip material that all the sugars are removed from the wood chip and a cement product. It's called Fastwall, and it too stacks, and they have reinforced concrete cores. It's not only resistant to earthquakes, but fire and pests and insects. One of the problems with concrete is insulation. It's a conductor of heat. It's not an insulator. And so when we build these concrete homes, we often have a whole separate interior wall of wood that has the insulation, or we'll also use foam blocks for insulation on the outside of the concrete between the earth and the concrete wall. So, yes.
You mentioned Salem Code, circa 1920s. My home was built about 2008, 2009. Did Salem ever change its code on securing to the sill plate?
Vicki, would you like to answer that one? No. The answer is yes, the codes do change. I think Bill, do you know what the code cycle is? Is it 4 years, 6 years? So, yeah. Which means gravity loads only, no consideration of wind or seismic. It's only been in the last, I think, the Malala earthquake was 94. So all of these events impact our codes. We learn from them and we respond to them. We actually have now we have a national code. So we're working off of a national code, and then a city adapts or adopts that code. So very different times. I mean, yeah, I have no idea what the codes were like in 20. Even if, some states don't even have building codes anymore. We designed a home up in Alaska, and there was no plan review. There were no inspections. So, yeah.
Nathan,
Yes.
just to follow up on that a little bit, some years ago I did a fair amount of research on the evolution of the codes, and when I first came to Oregon, we were in seismic zone 2.
Mm-hmm.
Then about 10, 15 years later, it went to 2B. And then after another period of time, it went to 3. And they finally put the coastal area as a zone 4.
Mm-hmm.
So it continues to evolve as they've had a better handle on it. But, some of the old houses, although generally speaking, residential is more resistant than, like unreinforced masonry or something like that. But so it keeps evolving as we learn more.
Mm-hmm. Now, my office is downtown above Jackson Jewelers, and one of the reasons we like that building is because it's a reinforced concrete building. Most of the buildings in downtown Salem are unreinforced masonry. And it's going to be devastating to our community when we have this big event, because even damaged masonry it can be as bad as fully failed masonry. It's very expensive to retrofit as well. So.
This is Deanna.
Yeah.
Hi. I missed the first part of your talk, so I hope this isn't redundant, but on our first home in Northern California, we put big X metal strapping in the walls, and then in our present home in Salem, they didn't want to do that, so they put in extra blocks in the wall. Does that even help, and what do they do for earthquake, like when you build new construction today?
My first impression, without knowing more, is that the braces, the diagonal steel braces or straps, would help a lot.
Yeah.
They would keep your wall from racking like this. The blocking, as we refer to blocking, they're pieces of wood that go in between the vertical members of a home.
Right.
Probably not doing much, unless they also included plywood panels over that with extensive nails and or screws.
Nope, they didn't do that.
Sorry.
I know.
Yeah.
But if we built another home, let's just say, then what would we do today in Salem? What do they do? What you just said?
The most common technique to provide lateral support to a home is with plywood panels over wood framing. And it's very effective. And actually, during the break, we were talking about some low-hanging fruit, some low-cost ways to make a home more seismically resistant or ability to withstand an earthquake. It's very common to have a two-car garage door, a 16, 18-foot wide garage door, 7 or 8 feet high. If your wall does not have any drywall on the inside, come in and either yourself or have somebody else put plywood all around that opening as wide as you can and put a lot of nails in it. Also anchor the wall on the sides of your garage too. The garages are subject to early failing because there often is not much support on either side of these older homes and their garage doors. So by anchoring it and putting this plywood around, that will help stabilize that, and so that your garage has a better chance of not collapsing on your car and not doing damage to your home as it starts to do this. It's the header that's above the garage door, that big beam above your garage door, that's easy to dislodge. So that plywood helps lock all of these wood frame members together.
Hi, Cassia here. My mom was an architect, and she worked for many years in Florida. And at one point, many, many years ago, she moved the entire family down to the Gulf Coast. And there she built a house, since we were right smack dab on the Gulf. She built a house that was on 8-foot pilings, and she built it with movable walls because we were right in the path of various hurricanes and storms. And so the drill in our house was when the warnings came through that a hurricane was on its way, all of us would immediately unlatch the walls. They were on pivots, either turn them outwards to catch the wind or lift them up and latch them into the ceiling. And then we would take all the valuables and stuff and put them in an underground waterproof stuff. And we'd all go inland. And it was fine. And we'd come back whenever the storm was over, and the only damage might be that the ponies and the chickens and the ducks and everybody were all in the living room. But, that was a small price to pay. But the house withstood and was still standing up until very recently when it was finally torn down. So that was one aspect of innovation. Now, you obviously couldn't do that here because it's not warm enough to do anything like that. But anyway, my question really had to do with flexibility, that being an example of architectural flexibility and innovation. But bamboo seems to be an up-and-coming material in a lot of different places. And that apparently has quite a lot of tensile strength and flexibility. Is there, obviously that seems to be a building material that's not going to be used here in Oregon for various reasons, but does it have potential for these withstanding earthquakes, things like that?
Well, it probably depends on how high and how much weight is on them. Right. I've seen some pretty good sized buildings that are strapped together with bamboo, and they still build scaffolding on tall buildings out of bamboo in those climates where it grows. So.
This is Kay. You mentioned the vulnerability of masonry, and my question is about chimneys in particular. I think you said there are ways to reinforce masonry chimneys to protect them from an earthquake. Is traditional stucco on the outside of them any reinforcement, or what methods do you suggest?
No stucco. That won't do it. That'll just crack and pop. There's steel reinforcing on a chimney. You'll often see chimneys in older homes anchored back to the roof. So you have your chimney going up here, you wrap it with a band of steel, and then you anchor it to the house. You want to get in, you don't want to create a water problem on your roof, but that anchor will help stabilize that chimney. So, but consult with a structural engineer just to be sure. Every condition is different. What other disclaimer can I think of? But it's a good point, because the collapsing chimney can be quite a source of harm, you know, both to somebody on the side or if it comes through the roof. So, and just because you know, part of the chimney, there's a large part of every chimney on the inside as well, and the collapse of it is a serious consideration. So it might be more than just anchoring the top of the chimney to the adjacent roof. It might be looking at how you can reinforce the rest of the chimney that's in the room as well. And the first thing that comes to mind is maybe there's some sort of a steel frame that could be built in a, you know, attractive enough to blend in with the design.
My name is Elaine, and I have a comment and a question. So my comment is about, I did stay in northern Italy one time, and it was in a concrete building. Not only does it conduct heat, it conducts cold. It was October, and they hadn't turned the heat on yet. And I mean, it was like 55 degrees, and we were literally freezing, but they didn't turn the heat on yet. But because it's all conduction, they said, oh, it takes about a month to warm up when we do turn the heat on. So, but it was, you know, we felt safe. It's but very cold. So the other thing is, I see now in housing, more in Central Oregon and in commercial buildings, they're using a lot of steel instead of 4x6s. Is that good or bad?
Well, we live in wood territory, and the biggest, we use a lot of steel in our homes, but that's the type of steel that's used to span large spaces or to create what's called a moment resistive frame, so that you can have a large window or an opening. It's not, we have yet to design a home that's been built with steel studs. The biggest problem with steel studs in our area is finding qualified people who can cost effectively build with that. So the other challenge we have with steel studs, and they're really light gauge metal, it's not fair to call them steel studs. Aluminum is probably more appropriate. They conduct heat and cool. You know, they're good conductors, thermal conductors. So we have to have thermal breaks somewhere so that the heat transfer is not occurring through those metal studs.
Oh, Paul here again. Hate to go back to Santa Rosa again, but on a per capita basis, more of their downtown buildings, which are made out of brick, fell in the 1906 earthquake on a per capita basis in San Francisco. But there's still a section of town where if you go, any brick building you go into on the inside, you see these big cross beams. They're not straps. I think they're beams. And so I must admit, in going into like the Reed Opera House down here or Busick Court, seeing these big brick walls, and there is nothing holding them. So there's a certain, well, I wouldn't say nervousness, but I have a feeling that those buildings they're just unreinforced masonry brick is likely to collapse.
Yes.
Well, I'd like to ask a question not really related to this. I believe that our homeless population has increased distinctly fast in the last several years. As an architect and a community member, do you have any response to that or any ideas how we might address what's going on?
Well, part of the homeless that I come in contact with the most are those from working downtown. And I come in contact with them, Monday through Friday, almost various times of the day. And my own experience is I come into contact with three types of homeless. The first type are those who are traveling through. They're on their way somewhere. They came to Oregon for the eclipse. They're going to a Grateful Dead concert in Madras or, something like that. The second type are the people who seem to me to be homeless by choice. And they are the individuals who maybe they have other options, but it's a safe place to sleep on the street in downtown. It's much more safe than under a bridge or in a forest somewhere, by sleeping on the sidewalk. And plus they have a better chance of making a little extra money. They interact with other people. There's a lot of interaction amongst the homeless people I see downtown. And then the third type that we witness are the people who have serious mental health considerations. And they're the ones that I personally am most concerned about because they need help. And they don't need the help of giving them a dollar bill or telling them that there's a soup kitchen up the street. There's a certain care that they need that's beyond their own knowing. And I don't know as an architect, what I can do about that perception of that, those individuals. So,
thank you. I think it's an unanswered question, certainly in a lot of communities, and a growing one as well. Any more comments? No? Well, in that case, I think that oh, wait, one more, hold on. Take Jim's.
If we have no other questions, I have a trivia question. The floor plan for your house referred to something called a flat soffit that seemed to extend across the entire house. What was that all about?
A flat soffit.
A flat soffit.
That is a trivia question, because I didn't know I had one.
I didn't know there was one.
Flat soffit.
Ceiling to flat soffit above.
Oh.
Master bath.
Right there. So what is happening there is that because this home, one of the main criteria of designing and building this home was cost effectiveness, that we have what are called TJIs, or they're like a 2x4 with a panel of plywood and a 2x4 at the bottom. They're good for spanning long spaces. So the whole roof in our living room is vaulted, and it's an unvented roof. And at that transition where we come into the bedroom, the ceiling lowers and becomes flat. And so, one of the main reasons for that is because I had to run all of the ductwork for the heat recovery ventilators and the vents to the wood stove in that area. And then there's a psychological benefit of just entering into a lower space before it opens back up into a larger space. So, yeah, good eyes.
All right, having spent a fair amount of money having vents put into our 1938 house when we had the roof replaced 25 years ago, why do you have an unvented roof?
I have an unvented roof because it was a very cost-effective way to build. It was just simple wood members that span from wall to wall in an upward slope, and it was more energy efficient, and it created a reduced chance of any mold or mildew forming on the underside of the plywood roof membrane at the top. So, but it required that we use 3.5, almost 4 inches of closed cell spray foam on the bottom of that plywood roof membrane. Did that all go anywhere? Yeah, kind of.
Yes, sort of.
Okay. Yeah.
Any more comments?
Uh-oh, here we go.
No, since supposedly we're intelligent, every time there's a disaster, we learn things. Isn't that correct? So I assume that the building industry goes through the same process when there's a disaster or something. They learn something about what happened and how to prevent this in the future. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I think you give a little too much credit to the industry. So now some of that, though, is reflected in codes. Some of that is reflected in our own experience. I mean, it's part of why I was sharing with you that I'd been in a tornado, that I've been in a wheelchair, that, you know, I've had bad stuff. I've experienced bad stuff, and it makes me want to design differently. It doesn't mean that my experience is codifying what's happening with other architects and builders, though. So in general, the building industry will design to the least cost option available. Most of the homes that are designed and built in the United States are not designed by architects. They're created by production builders, and they're built to make profit. It's a large industry. You can buy and sell home builder stock. And it doesn't mean that industry actually tends to fight code development rather than support code development. So, and that occurs here in Oregon as well too. Our energy codes are constantly under assault by the Home Builders Association, and that's been occurring, you know, this year as we're working towards better codes. We think that zero energy homes are a very cost-effective option in the next 5 years. But and trying to get our codes to respond to that opportunity is very difficult. So anyway, I could that's a whole nother blood pressure topic.
Well, in that case, we'll bring this to a close. I'd like to just let you know that we are fortunate this year to have the other half of this fine team. April Waters, Nathan's wife, will be speaking to us in the spring. So be sure and come back next semester. In the meantime, thank you, Nathan. It's been wonderful.